What is happening, everybody? Welcome back to Voice from the Corner. Mental health, as I like to call it, life. We talk about people's lives on here, but we hit hard on mental health. Obviously, set the channel up in my brother's name, who took his own life due to his mental health. I am very, very pleased with getting my next guest on. A lot of you might not know who he is, but a lot of you will know who his brother is. And who his dad was. Elvis Costello's brother, Ronan Macmanus. He will introduce more about his dad and all that sort of stuff as we go along. But great to have you on, Ronan. Thank you very much.
Great to be here. Thanks for asking me on.
Obviously, we met first time. I loved your music, Bible Code Sundays. A massive, massive shout out to the Bible Code Sundays. I mean, since I've had the song on the channel, a lot of people, I've downloaded that. Oh, I've got that in my car. Maybe it's because I'm an Irish Londoner. Love the song.
Yeah.
Plenty of other great songs you've done yourself, but you know, you're from a long string of musicians anyway, ain't you? You know?
Yeah. My dad was a musician. His dad was a musician. So we all got sort of passed on. So there's basically, my dad was married twice, had Declan, who's Elvis Costello from the first marriage, and there's 4 brothers from the second marriage with about a 20-year gap. So you sort of have the Elvis Costello, then you have a 20 years, and then there was 4 of us in 5 years. So we all took up music. So it was kind of in the house the whole time we were growing up, was music everywhere. So it was our family business, I always say, you know, it was just we all followed into the business. So it was natural for us to do that. But yeah, my dad had a lot of success in his time. He did the secret lemonade drinker advert. People know about, people know him from that. But he was also on Radio 1 every week, you know, and he was with Joe Loss Orchestra, decent amount of fame in his time. Spent all his money by the time we were born, unfortunately, but he had a good time doing it. So he kept singing into he was still touring around the country in his late 60s. You know, he passed on about 10 years ago now. But we've all followed in his footsteps and kept the music alive.
Obviously, before we move on, listen, this is about you, but everybody knows who Elvis Costello is. If anybody knows their music, they know who Elvis Costello is. Obviously, his name wasn't Elvis Costello. You know, Explain to people why he changed his name to Elvis Costello.
Well, yeah, he was born Declan Macmanus, Royal Macmanuses. And Costello is actually a family name. So it's our great grandmother, Elizabeth Costello, as they say in Ireland. And I know a lot of Costello's around Connemara area. I know that. So a lot of Costello's there. That was rumored we don't know where she was from. I've been trying to solve that mystery in the family. But you know, Dad, the family myth is that she was from Connemara, so we might be related, Peter. So he chose. He was Declan Costello because my dad was still quite well known at that time, so he didn't want to take the McManus name because he didn't want to be compared to his dad. And so he sort of he's used Declan Costello, and then his management at the time when he sort of went to go big, Elvis Presley was still alive. Just about. His first album came out in 1977, and Elvis Presley died the same year. But the idea was just that it was a bit cheeky to take the name Elvis because there was only ever one Elvis, and to sort of take his name was a bit of a anarchic thing to do. A bit of anarchy, and there's always good when you're starting out as a musician in that post-punk time. So around that punk era, I suppose it was 1977. So yeah, that was kind of the reason why his management took the idea of the word Elvis, but Costello being the family name. So that was just changing it to get away from comparisons with my dad because he was from a very different era. It was like the really old school by that point, you know. So he didn't wanted to carve his own path. So that was kind of the reason behind that.
The year, obviously, that was the year I was born. Some special things happened in 1977. You know, my age,
well, I was 70, just the end of 76. December 76. So my wife was born in 77. That was pretty special. But
what's your birthday? December what?
7th.
I'm 21st.
December 7th. Yeah. So I was just crept into 76. But so it was. I was kind of his first album came out while I was only a baby. So you know he's always been famous my whole life. So the guy that he used to come around the house, you know, in between touring, he'd come around to see Dad, and that guy, and then the guy that was on the telly would be sort of seem like two different people to us, you know. So we had sort of Elvis Costello on the telly, and then Deck that came around the house. So it was a kind of a really kind of strange thing to grow up and him always be famous, but at the same time, it sort of made that having a career to that extent, it seemed achievable for us because our brother was doing it. You know, for a lot of people, being a pop star or being on the radio, being on Top of the Pops and all that kind of stuff was like this sort of far off dream. But for us, it was like, well, it's possible because our brother's doing it. So made it seem achievable for us, and made it seem like music wasn't in the same category as astronaut. You know, it was like it was a job you could do. And my dad was a gigging, jobbing musician, so he sort of taught us how to do it as a job on a day-to-day level. So that's the kind of. But yeah, he was bringing over his new albums he'd been making, and we go to gigs. And the first band I technically ever saw was the Pogues, because they were supporting him at the Hammersmith Odeon. And we were only kids. We all went all dressed in London Irish rugby tracksuits, four little lads in tracksuits. And the first band we saw was a support act, and that was the Pogues. So I'm not saying it affected me very much, but ended up in the Bible Code Sundays writing very similar music to the Pogues with the Irish twist.
Obviously, you had your dad had a big connection with London Irish, the rugby team.
Yeah, we all played rugby when we were kids. Yeah.
So obviously,
yeah, we all played rugby. Go on.
Go on, mate. Go on. You carry on.
I was going to say we all played rugby as kids. It was more about the community, the Irish community that was surrounded it, and the music and everything that went on around it. It was much more so than the rugby, really. When we were, as far as my mum and dad were concerned, certainly we all enjoyed the rugby and the playing sport. But it was really all about the singing in the bar and the music and the crack. Really, that was really what it was all about for us. And it was fairly close to where we grew up, and around down Twickenham. London Irish was only in Sunbury, so it was only about 10-15 minute drive away from us. So it was a hub of Irish community, which was really important to my dad.
So obviously when Elvis, you know, pops in, sees the family and all that sort of stuff, do you call him Elvis or do you call him Declan?
Oh, he's Deck. Yeah. It was always Deck. And then my kids is Uncle Deck. You know, then it's a sort of weird thing that you know, one of my kids' teachers is a massive Elvis Costello fan, and she showed a picture, and he's, oh yeah, that's my Uncle Deck. And it was like, for them, they don't think of it, you know, they don't think of they don't know the sort of influence that he's had. You're like, he's quite famous, isn't he? I said, yeah, he is quite famous. Yeah, could say that, but kids don't really get it. Like, we didn't get it when we were kids. It was just our, well, it didn't feel like a brother, because there was such an age gap and we were little, and he's got a son around our age, so he sort of felt like more like an uncle, I suppose, when we were growing up. But as we got older, we become closer as brothers, and that's become more of a thing. But the 20-year-old age gap is always does kind of made it harder when we were kids to really feel that brotherly connection. That came much more in adulthood. Do you think I'm going to go off the subject a little bit here, just something that plays on my mind a lot of the time, but do you think the era now of singing and all that sort of stuff, is it become, I'm comparing this now to boxing, has it become more social media now? If you've got a massive following, you're going to make it more than... It's certainly become more important. So streams, YouTube views, downloads, are not even as big as streams now. You know, before it went from record sales to downloads, and now it's more streams, you know. And, you know, I always say this, it's the hardest time in some ways for musicians, and some ways it's the easiest time. So if you can get a buzz going, and you can get a kind of a viral hit, then you know you can really make massive waves, but completely on your own without any sort of help. But it's really hard to do that. More likely what's going to happen is you're going to need to still pay for some kind of marketing, so, you know, but it's harder because you can't make money as quickly, because streams don't really bring any money in unless you're really getting millions and millions and millions of streams. So it's harder in some ways. You've got to be every part of a record company, because it's all It's all, before an artist would just be the artist. You'd have a record label had all different departments of marketing, that have PR, that have all your accountancy, you'd have your management, you'd have all the different parts of your setup, and you have different departments for each of those things. Now you've got to do it all yourself. You're expected to be a top class businessman as well as being an artist, and those two things don't always go hand in hand. They're kind of the different sides of the brain being, so why so many. I think we're in danger of getting to the point where we have a load of good businessmen who can play a bit rather than really good artists. And that's the danger of where we're heading in terms of the artistic side of music. It's much more about the business and not so much about the music in the music business these days. And I think it's going to be detrimental in the long term. For now, it's a quick buck. So the record labels just want to sign a sure thing, which is always ends up being kind of people with a bit of profile, maybe people who look amazing and can sing a bit, or people that can sing amazingly and look amazing. But gone are the days where you can be a proper true artist and get a massive load of money to be developed. No artists are developed anymore. They have to come out fully formed, and then they've got a shelf life of about 5 years, and then they're gone again. Then the next one is wheeled in. And this is the worry about the music business going forward in terms of, I'm not going to put it in terms of sound like an old fogey. Oh, it's all just noise these days. It's easy to go down that road. There are some really good artists out there, even some really good popular artists out there. But I do worry about the artistic longevity of the artists that are making it out there now.
I mean, just what you just said there, that mirrors boxing in my opinion, because like you say, people are into nick a quick buck, and the Jake Pauls of the world and people like that, and you've got other people like yourself, like myself, done it our whole life, and you see people just walk in with a passport, an Instagram passport with a blue tick and millions of followers. Nah, mate, we'll get this straight away. So what does an Olympic medal mean anymore? In boxing, what does it mean? It don't mean nothing if you ain't got popularity. It's all about popularity in this day and age. It's not about, he's got a lovely voice. Do you know what I mean? Because
it's similar to what AJ did. He sort of built a whole persona around himself, a whole business around himself, and he's built a whole brand around himself. So it's not. I mean, he gets plenty of detractors in terms of his boxing ability these days, and plenty of people think Tyson Fury are going to make mincemeat out of him when they ever get a chance to fight. But it's he's built a whole brand around what he's doing, and he's made a positive movement in terms of getting other boxers under his wing and that kind of thing. So he used his platform of winning the Olympic medal to kind of build this whole brand, this AJ brand. And that's what it's all about. We were talking about yesterday. I was chatting to a guy who's a legendary music producer, and he was saying, it's not. Look at some of the biggest artists in the world, biggest singers in the world. They're not making money from like Beyonce and that. They're not making money from their music. They're making money from their perfume and the clothing line and all that sort of stuff.
And their appeal, what they look like, and their image. You know what
Absolutely,
I mean?
Their social media presence and all the things. The whole thing that is making a brand of them rather than actually musicians. And I actually find a real affinity with being kind of like the next generation, even though Elvis Costello isn't my dad. It's sort of, there is that same age gap in the way that he would be. So I'm still following in his footsteps 20 years after behind him, which is similar sort of thing you find with a lot of the kids of boxers. So you find like Chris Eubank Jr., Conor Benn, what's he called, Ricky Hatton's son, Campbell Hatton, and there's a whole spate of kids. I think Prince Nassim's son's coming through now, and there's a whole sort of thing. But this is the same sort of pressure that I had, is that trying to find their own feet in the wake of what their dad did, and that's a real tough one. And it's like they'll be given a shot maybe earlier than they really should do in terms of their development, or they may get judged wrongly because of who their dad is. And I had this issue, but it can be a curse and a blessing coming from a legacy like that, and but I think there's definitely media's kind of getting in the way of boxing talent and pure
raw talent.
There'll always be those that come through and they'll always get those, but there's plenty that will never break through that into that mainstream, because they haven't got what it takes in terms of their personality or their Instagram ability and all that kind of shit, you know. So yeah.
But I wanna obviously, before we move on to what we really are here to talk about, I do wanna ask you a question, because, like you say, your brother's a legend, right? But I made this comment the other day, and I said it as straight as I can be. So when people say Tyson Fury, they're from a fighting family, you know, Tommy Fury and all that, I said, let me tell you something. The life I've lived, yeah, the life I've been through, yeah, right, I've always been a fighter. I've always just shrugged it off and gone, right? I'm a McDonough. My brother was a McDonough, but it don't mean my brother was the same as me. My brother
No.
put a rope around his neck and killed himself. So I don't believe in that, you know, the family have done it, so they can do it. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
You know
And
what I mean?
it can also be a curse and a blessing, because you kind of get dismissed as, you know, sort of, I know that certainly it can be two things. You get dismissed by some people because of who your brother is, or because of who your family is. But also from what I know from a point of view, when I was younger, I think I thought that it would be easier to make it, wouldn't have to work as hard.
Yeah.
And so that was my bad, because I sometimes didn't work as hard as I should have done.
Yeah.
Because maybe I thought, well, I've got this legacy behind me that it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, so it can be two sides of it. Whereas, you know, I look at some of these guys and the kids of the boxers, like, you know, how hard Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr. are working, you know, and you really have to want it. And I think I worry about that in terms of young artists coming through with a legacy behind them, or something behind them that means that they just feel like maybe they're owed a living, and you're not. But it also can work. Yeah, it can work the other way. People can judge you harshly.
Yeah. I mean that can go down on your mental health badly as well, can't it? Because, like you say, look, I'm going to be honest. Neither of them are at that level, and I don't think either of them are ever going to be better than their dads. And that's the truth of it.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I mean? But they don't have to be. That's not the point, isn't it? Because it's like I didn't set out in music to be better than Elvis Costello. I've got my own things to say, and I've got my own way of doing things, and that should be enough in its own right. You don't judge, like, you know, I don't know. You don't judge James Bay because he's not as good as Bob Dylan. They're not related to each other. So so therefore they're not compared. But that's the problem. You always be compared.
Media pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
No.
And they should be judged. I know what I know what you're saying and why you're saying it. And it's not you're not saying it because that it's an important part, but that is what people will focus on. They won't be. I mean, how could you come through and expect to have the same career as Nigel Benn had when you're a different, you're your own entity? You know, he has to have his own career in his own right, but will he be given the freedom and the chance to do that? Who knows? Probably not.
I mean, the thing what we got to look at as well, like I say, every other, I don't know with singing, you can tell me now while we're here. I don't know, but in boxing, there is no critics whatsoever. I know there's loads of music. There's loads of critics in music. Why is there no critics in boxing? Why don't someone say, like, oh, you know what? I think he could be as good as his dad, blah, blah. They go, hold up a minute. He's a different human being to his dad, for starters, right? He's made a different material to his dad. All that DNA business and all that sort of, listen, John Fury never even won, I don't even think he won a title, yeah? You can't compare Tyson Fury to John Fury. You can't compare it.
No.
He's his dad, that's it.
Yeah, but there's different eras, different circumstances around them. There are different amounts of hard work, different amounts of, because, you know, talent can bring you so far, but you got to work hard at it. It's the same thing with music. You can be as musically talented as you want. And I had all this pressure on me when I was 17, 18. I was going to be the next Elvis Costello. Everyone said that all the time. And I had all this sort of expectation on my shoulders. And for me to live up to, he's an extraordinary artist in terms of, this is my brother I'm talking about now, in terms of the ingredients that went into making him who he is. His circumstances growing up were different to mine because he came from a different, same dad, but different mum, different era, different set of circumstances. So it was not really fair to compare a 17-year-old kid to an artist who at that point was in his 40s or, you know, knocking 40 and had, you know, the whole of the late 70s and the 80s are worth of albums, which was one a year at least. And he was already a legend by the time I was 17. You know, so it wasn't really fair of anybody to, but that comparison is always going to come, and I understood that. I don't think I handled it very well, you know, and looking back on it now, if I could be, but the age, you need to mentor these people, and I never had anybody put their arm around me and tell me how to handle it, you know, and I feel like now there's a lot more focus on that, especially with people's mental health, with there being such a heightened, you know, what's the word, focus on it.
Yeah.
And the stigma being broken down. There is still a stigma there, but talking about it more and being able to sort of let people know that you know, you've got to keep your feet on the ground. At the same time, you've got to express yourself, and you've got to be honest with yourself, honest with people around you, and you've got to and it's all right to you know, to feel like it's too difficult sometimes. And I certainly felt at times it was just such a massive mountain to climb to try and get to where Elvis Costello is. And that's an unfair pressure to put on myself.
I mean, I will say this. For me, exactly what you've just said there, I think that's what music needs. I think that's what sports needs in general, is people to put their hands around people. There should be more money invested in that sort of thing and say, listen, mate, you might not be that good. It ain't about being a negative. It's called positive criticism, right? And the thing is, when you were 17 years old, people was blowing smoke up your ass because your brother was Elvis Costello. That's the truth of it. That's
it is, yeah, exactly.
When you look back at reality, but you don't know. You're 17 years old. You think you're going to be the next biggest thing in the world. We all think that. We all think you're going to be. But sometimes you need a realist around you to tell you the truth. So when we look at the likes of Cristiano Ronaldo, right, his agent is real. His agent knows what he's doing. Yeah, he's got the right people around him. Anthony Joshua has got the right people around him. Yeah, in my opinion, Anthony Joshua has got a great team around him of what they've done for Anthony Joshua. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, so, absolutely. I feel like if I could go back and talk to my 17-year-old self, as knowing what I know now and all the mistakes I made, all the opportunities I missed, I would definitely change my focus and say, right, stop looking at Elvis Costello as some sort of benchmark. Stop expecting to be there. Just concentrate on what you're doing now. Take care of your own business day to day. I know I didn't have the artistry at 17 years old. What we're taught, that you have to be the biggest thing in the world by the time you're 20 or else you're over the hill, or even 18, but then you're over the hill. Whereas, you know, now I'm writing better songs than I ever wrote, but I'm 44 now and I'm too old. I understand the music business now much better than I ever did when I was younger. And it has changed in all my time so massively. But I enjoy now. I'm too old. I'm too old now to take advantage of it. But what I am doing now, I'm part of a management team of a young girl who's just turned 19. A girl called Breeze Redwine. She's absolutely brilliant, very talented. But part of the job is to try to help her to learn from my mistakes and keep her focused on her task. And that's in front of her now. Not planning your comeback tour when you're in your 60s. You know, when you're in your mind, you're already planning what you're going to do when you're rich and famous, and you know, thinking, well, I've got a lot of work to do right now, and this is what I've got to tackle. And if this is part of the mental health thing, is just taking the next step that you need to take, and having a big plan, and then so having somebody around that can devise that plan. And I'm sure all those guys like Conor Ben, Chris Eubank Jr., Campbell Hatton, they have people around them that are advising them on the steps to get to where they need to get to.
They ain't. They've just got a load of yes men around them and taking money off them. That's all they're doing. That's all they're doing. You know, and for me, this is what I'm saying. This is where things are missing in boxing. You know, if I was looking after Campbell Hatton, I'd have Campbell Hatton on small shows like Dennis Hobson shows, right? And not put the pressure on the kid, right? I'm not saying that Ricky's doing a bad job or nothing, but they've chose to go down that avenue. But I believe he needs a lot more nurturing than what Ricky Hatton did. Ricky Hatton was a top amateur. So Ricky Hatton...
Yeah,
Frank Warren,
exactly,
Frank Warren done a great job with Ricky Hatton. I've got to say, Frank Warren done a great job with Ricky Hatton. But what I will say is this, Ronan, we're from the same generation, right? I'm going to tell you now straight. See this Instagram, Twitter, social media, right? Believe me, see when these kids at 15 to 20 years old are at our age, they will all be in institutions, mate, because it's false. It's not real. It's not real. And until people start turning things around and telling people this is not real, listen, they're driving about a flash car. They ain't got a tin of beans in the cupboard indoors, right? They're little kids running around in a shitty nappy. I'm being real, mate. That's how it is. Do you know what I mean? But they want to live this persona. They want to live this. Look, people look at us as has-beens. No, we've got experience, right?
Yeah.
And when people turn around and say, you know what? We don't need old blood. We need young blood. Let me tell you something. I don't listen to young music. I listen to Elton John. I listen to, you know,
I was talking to someone about this the other day. I was saying the biggest bands in the world that can fill a stadium are still the same ones, apart from a few exceptions. Still the same ones that filled them in the 80s and 90s. Still talking about Rolling Stones, R.E.M., U2. You know, they're still the biggest bands in the world. There's a few slip through the net, like you have make themselves like Ed Sheeran and these sort of guys are still huge. But a lot of the big, because there's no longevity in those. And then all that's happening now is that if it's right what you're saying about Campbell Hatton and those guys, is that they're going to be they know they've got a short space in the limelight to actually make all that money, because they're saying, well, if they haven't got what it takes to go all the way, they can make money from the name and the fact that they're new, they're coming through, people are going to watch them. But if they were serious about and they felt like they had the talent to have a long career, you take your time, you know. But I don't know. I mean, this is the instant gratification generation we live in, and you need to make money now, get it done right now. And the thing is, you can make that happen with social media now. This is the thing; it can seduce you into thinking that you can be this world superstar overnight because it's happened before.
Yeah.
But the people who make those overnight successes are the ones normally have 10 years of build up behind them, and suddenly they're 10 years and then they're an overnight success. But there's sort of seduces you to think that you can, everyone can do it because it's all in your own hands, and then it falls down around you. And this is the danger of this current and the danger in terms of mental health.
I mean, Ronan, you know, we keep talking about, we are going to get onto that in a minute, but just a couple of things which you've come out with there. And again, right, the world is a stage, and we are all just little parts of it, right? That is what it is. It's a stage, mate, and we're all acting, and we're all here for a certain reason. But what I will say is I've got off the phone just before I spoke to you. Very, very respectful person in boxing. Very, very respectful person in boxing. And I said, is there something wrong with me? I said, because to me, even myself, I think, you know what? Am I a little bit negative about it? Oh, do you know what? He said, no, you are real, and you're saying it as it is. He said, but let me just tell you something. He said, there used to be boxing fans. Now there's boxer fans. So they support a boxer and go home. Yeah. And I thought, years ago, there used to be a scorecard, right? You written who you think's winning the fight. The fans done that. There's no such thing anymore. It's all swept under the carpet when it's a terrible decision and all that sort of stuff. And I said to him, but will I make a job in media? Will I get a job in media? Because I believe I'm the Roy Keane of boxing. I'm the Roy Keane. I say it as it is. And that's the end of it. I'm only going to say what I see. Yeah? I'm not going to look at you there and say, there's a Chinese geezer sitting there. You're not Chinese. but people do that. People do that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Listen, you can be a company man all you want, but we need conflict within. Pundits should be there should be conflict. They shouldn't be puppets. They should be pundits. For their experiences they've had, they should sit there and say, listen, I've always said I'm not 100% right, but I'm 100% real. Yeah? And we all make mistakes. Yeah? Ronan, I didn't think that singer was that good. But you might go, yeah, I think he was good. But that causes a debate and it's exciting. It's not, oh yeah, you're right. You know what you're talking about. You know everything. You know what I mean? And that's what it seems to be. It seems to be in what they're doing.
Yeah, there's definitely a lack of real opinions and lack of people who actually know what they're talking about. And you know, so I think I would agree. I want to see you out there, scrappy do, giving it large.
But you know what? You've got to have excitement after a fight, especially when a fight ain't that good neither. You've got to have excitement. You've got to have someone that's trying to You know, it was
Yeah,
trying
but
to.
it's it's like with those because there's an agenda to why certain fights become top of the card and why some of them there's world title fights on the undercard of YouTubers
Yeah,
because whether that's where the money is and it's just it's a but I mean I've been a boxing fan for years and years and years and always used to watch boxing, loved it, and even stepped into the ring once myself in a white collar, so I'm 1-0 undefeated.
Anyone that wants it, he's ready to go. There was an agenda. There was an agenda to this. There's an agenda to this podcast.
We were both 0-0 when we went stepped to the ring, me and another guy. So one of our 0-0s had to go, but it was So it was, but it's something I've always loved and always been interested in. But there is definitely there's that question mark over. There's also a shady side to it and things that go wrong, and there's an agenda to all of those fights and all of those. Like it's been some terrible fights and then they're still talking it up on the telly because they have to because it's all part of that's what's bringing the money in. The fact that Eddie Hearn will do another fight on Sky or whatever, and they actually have to try and find something positive to say rather than saying that was shite.
But listen. This is what I'm saying again. Is it good for people's mental well-being though? Of people telling lies all the time because they believe it.
That's the whole same. It's the same thing as having everyone's Facebook profile, everyone's Instagram profile makes them out like everyone's having these amazing lives, and they're not. It's the same thing. It's all a front, and it's not like the Wizard of Oz. You pull the curtain back, and it's not what it seemed to be. And this is so many sides of life is like that. And so you get these, as you say, you get these yes men around the boxes telling them how great they are and how great it is, and how they're going to be the next big thing. And then Eddie Hearn's pushing them and whatever it is. And then there's no substance to it. At the end of the day, when it all comes crashing down, they're thrown on scrap heap and left behind, and all those people that were with them stood by their side and moved on to the next person.
Yeah. It's like a meat market, isn't it? It's like
it's
a meat
the life
market.
that we live.
Yeah, it's
the same with music.
Yeah. Obviously now, I do want to touch on the lockdown because I wonder whether that caused a lot of stuff in your head when we had the lockdown. Obviously, you couldn't perform. You're still performing now. You're back with the Bible Code Sundays, doing your bits and
doing
pieces,
some stuff with the lads is great. I mean, I think for me, I actually quite enjoyed the lockdown time because a lot of when it came to, I've suffered a lot with anxiety, and I didn't really realize a lot of this how bad that got actually until coming out lockdown when it was looking back on the previous years. But the anxiety around gigs and performing was this kind of thing that was there. Obviously with lockdown, I wasn't performing, and the pressure was off me. Didn't have to be anywhere. It didn't have to go. I wasn't, there was no pressure on me to perform and be at a certain level. Most of the pressures I put on myself, in fairness, but all that was gone. And so it wasn't until coming out of lockdown and the gigs were back on, and I felt that anxiety in my stomach. I was like, oh yeah, I recognized that. I was like, oh God, what is that? And so I did some hypnotherapy stuff to actually address that. And I realized that had always been there, and I had never addressed it. I just lived with it. But actually, so the lockdown time gave me a bit of a chance to take some pressure off myself. And it wasn't easy in terms of personal life because my wife's a nurse. She was on the front line of it all. She got really bad dose of COVID quite early on, and was really quite ill with it. And there were pressures and worries on the other side of it. But in terms of my day-to-day pressures on stage music, the pressure I put on myself, that had all been lifted. And it wasn't until I came back to gigging after the lockdown that I recognized this, and I thought I shouldn't have to live with this. And that's when I dealt with it. But you don't realize what becomes your normal. And that's what that anxiety had become my normal. And I was living with it, and I was feeling terrible most of the time. So I thought, well, now, so when I've done some work on myself, some hypnotherapy stuff, there's a great girl, friend of my wife's over in County Mayo. She's Laura McDonald. She's absolutely brilliant at what she does. And we did some work, some hypnotherapy sessions, and it was really interesting going under this sort of like hypnotic state.
Was you doing them online, or was you doing them?
Did them on Zoom. On Zoom, yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
And it was just absolutely life changing, revelatory in terms of learning about myself and and it's all about your past and how that. So you sort of, I won't go too far into it, but there's some aggressive hypnotherapy stuff that was really great, and you sort of visit past versions of yourself in your mind, and you kind of deal with it all. And it's like something that I had always been interested in doing. Never thought it would be as effective as it was. But that was just from thinking I don't have to live with this feeling. And so many people just live with it, and you don't have to. You can have a happier life. That is possible. And but yeah, it was so. But I didn't find that I didn't miss gigging as much as I thought I would, because of the fact that the anxiety was around it. Now I'm performing again. Now I've set it up differently. So I've set up my gigs in a different way. So I'm playing with different people all the time. So I'm back singing with the Bible Code sometimes, which is great seeing the boys. We still feel like we can do it, but like we were 18 and we can't because we're too old now. 3 songs in, we're out of breath. But but like playing with them has been brilliant. And then I'm playing with my brother Rory, which has been great as well. Playing with different musicians, friends of mine. So every night is something different. And that's the key to it for me. Keeping it interesting. And the fact that was also a bit necessary to do that, because the gigs, are not as many gigs around. So basically it's just two sides to that. So while it keeps it interesting for me and for everyone around me, it doesn't get stale. You're not doing the same thing every night, day in, day out. Because I'd got into a stage where I was doing gigs just on my own, day in, day out. And that is a lonely time. And that was making things worse in terms of the depression, anxiety. And I got very, very, very low ebb around the time that I left the Bible Codes. I was in a bit of a bad state, and I needed to kind of get some space and sort myself out. And now sort of feel like I've done so much work and changed as a person because of it. I've been sober now 4 years nearly. Be 4 years in October, give up drink. And all those things combined have just completely changed my life.
I mean, you made that sound so simple there with the hypnosis, but we know that you've done a lot more in your life before that happened. I mean, you've been through it, and I want you to explain to the viewers, what you've been through. I mean, obviously back in the days of the Bible Codes early on, you said you was drinking all the time, you was taking drugs, you was, but you was ill, weren't you? You was ill. Let's be honest.
Well, yeah. I mean, we had a great time at the time. It was like, we're drinking a lot, and we were drinking too much. Sometimes we weren't the band that we should have been on certain important occasions. I'll never say that we didn't have a good time doing it. It got to the stage where I really wasn't enjoying it by the end, and I could see that I had various little times off it and little holidays off booze. But the booze always led to drugs. Drugs were never a major thing for me. It just one led to the other, and then that keeps you out later. It keeps you drinking longer, and it keeps you making bad decisions. And it was starting to really affect my life, my home life, my creativity. And when I stopped drinking, the rush of creativity that came, and I realized how much I loved singing and how much I loved writing songs. And there was more songs coming. I was just in a better place. I was a better husband, a better dad. And I was a better friend, and everything was just better. It got to the point where it got on top of me a bit, and was starting to sort of weigh down on me. But I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that all my drinking time was terrible, and it wasn't.
I mean,
we had some brilliant times.
Sorry, Ronan, before you carry on, we've had this conversation off air in the past, and I always ask you, don't I? I always say, but what is an alcoholic? What is an alcoholic?
Well, I never classed myself as an alcoholic, because I mean, I look at it as if alcohol is a negative in your life, and that's I don't judge it by if you're an alcoholic you have to stop drinking. If you can moderate it, great. I couldn't I couldn't moderate it. I didn't have an off switch. So alcohol became a negative in my life, and to the point where I just said, I've had enough and I'm stopping. But it took me a long time to get to that stage. And I don't think it's like having whiskey on your cornflakes every morning or needing a drink to get out of bed. There are people that do live that, but it doesn't mean that if you're not doing that, then you haven't got an issue. Because I didn't do any of that stuff, and I still had an issue because it was a negative in my life, and it wasn't. And what kept me off the drink was logic kicked in, and I realized I was better at life. My life was better. I was better at singing. I realized how much I love singing and how much when I was drinking, I go to a gig, and pretty soon after a few pints, the focus would be on getting drunk and not on the gig. The gig would be getting in the way. At times the gigs and go on tour, and the gigs are just a pain in the arse because the gigs are interrupting your drinking session. You're on a 2-week drinking session with your best mates, and the gigs are just they're just an inconvenience to have to go on stage. And this is what it gets to. And honestly, there's so many times we played with Dropkick Murphys in Boston, in the House of Blues in Boston on Paddy's Day, in something like 2008 or 9 or something like that. I mean, what an opportunity. We actually took it easy on the drink a few days before that. We actually did a good job at that. But we still got absolutely hammered afterwards, which was fine. But there's plenty of times where we weren't that professional. We weren't maybe we missed opportunities. I look back and think how many opportunities we missed just from not being focused enough and dropping the catch, But we were, we were living the life of an Irish band. We were all mostly second generation Irish. There's actually 2 Irish-born lads, 2 second generation, and 2 English lads was really how the band ended up. We had another member who was Irish before that, but it had a quite good balance of English and Irish and the London Irish. So it was a real mixture bands. We took our influences from the Pogues as well as from Oasis and all those things, and Rolling Stones and the Clash, but drink and drugs, sex, drugs and rock and roll. We didn't get that much sex. We certainly did the other 2. So it was. We had a good time doing it. I would never regret. I wouldn't say I've got regrets through all of it. There's sometimes when I cringe at myself and think, I wish I could have just been better, a better version of myself, and we may have had more success.
I mean, another thing I want to touch on here, because I know you alluded to it earlier, exactly what you're doing.
There's a question coming up. There's a question coming up here.
Yeah. I'll ask that in a minute. But I will say this. What you're doing now for that young girl, right? I know you, and I know when you're going around as a band, if you had someone like yourself now looking after a band like your band, do you think you'd listen to that person?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I think unless, depends who it was, but I think I think at a certain point I may have done. When we were at our height, I don't think anything could have stopped us being who we were. I mean, our drummer also played with Bad Manners, and he was saying that they were renowned for their drinking, but they couldn't hold a candle to some of the. This is what it's our drummer Carlton, who's passed away now, but he gigged with Bad Manners at the same time he was gigging with us. He'd be go off on tour with them and go on tour with us. He was saying sometimes we'd put them to shame, and so but we were all functioning human beings with like wives and kids and jobs and just as well as having this other life, which was just crazy. So it's I don't know. That's a tough one as to whether we would have listened to anybody telling us to take the foot off the pedal. I think it depends on who it was. If it had been a record label and we had a well-respected manager saying, "Lads, you got to sort this out. You've got to be on the ball here," I think I would have been receptive to it. But whether we would have done it as a band, I don't know. We were at a time. It wasn't complete. I don't want to paint the picture of us all being completely irresponsible. It wasn't quite like that. We were very. We planned a lot of good stuff. We did a lot of great gigs, and we did some really important gigs. And we achieved a lot as a band. I just think as soon as the session started, it was just too much to resist for us. We loved it.
But listen, you was an Irish band. That was the image. If you was drinking orange juice, people would have think this ain't a proper Irish band.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
I mean, is an alcoholic someone who cannot moderate drinking? I mean,
yeah, I think so. I think there's definitely whether you class it as an alcoholic or whether I don't think the term alcoholic is helpful sometimes. I think it's just whether alcohol is a negative in your life. For me, it became a negative, and I realized that it was causing more problems than it was solving. And then my issue was that about 2 or 3 drinks in, I lost the ability to think, to make good decisions. So then I'd stay out longer, or I would decide to go somewhere, do something, or whatever it might be, and or decide to go and get a gram of cocaine. Stuff that I'd never do when I was sober. Sometimes get behind the wheel of a car. I did that a few times, drunk, and I was like, because I'm not thinking straight. And then the more it alters your ability to think rationally, that's when it starts to get dangerous. And that's when you've got to start to think, do I need this in my life? And for me, I weighed it up, and it took me a good few years of taking a couple of weeks off here. I actually took 9 months off it after I lost my parents. I lost them both around the same time. I took 9 months off it, and that was meant to be forever. And I just ended up falling back into it. But the attitude, that was in 2012. And then when I eventually gave up in 2016, those 4 years, it was at 2017, whenever, I don't know, I can't remember what it was now. But it just in that amount of time, the attitude had changed for people around me to them reacting to me saying I've given up drink. Back when in 2012, it was much like, oh, don't be stupid, have a pint, And then those few years had changed. People's attitude were like, oh, that's great, mate. Well done. Good on you. I wish I could. And that was those sort of comments I was getting. So it was a different, I think society's attitude towards it's changed, and it's a lot easier to make that decision to stop now than it was years ago.
I mean, what I want you to tell the listeners, Ronan, again, this is not a, we're not specialists or anything, but it's Ronan's experience and what he done to help him get off drink. And what did you do? You obviously done something to do it because
in the early few weeks, I went to AA. Because I felt like I wanted to do something to keep me on track. And then I still recommend it, and a lot of people get a lot out of it. Some people, it's not really for them. For me, logic kicked in, and I realized that I was better at singing, and I had something that was keeping me sober. But a lot of people don't have something like that obviously they get instant gratification from, an instant sign of being and doing the right thing, and something that benefits them. So I think that AA can be great. It can get a bit God sometimes, which a lot of people puts a lot of people off. Gets a bit religious sometimes. But if you find the right group, there's not, the one I went to wasn't really that way. It wasn't very religious. But I found it was really good in keeping me focused, keep me centered, because the first few weeks are the hardest, because you still have alcohol in your system. You still kind of want to go and have a pint. And after a little while, you don't really crave it anymore, So the meetings were quite important for me to keep myself on track. And I felt like that was a positive thing that I could do. But as soon as logic kicked in, and what I then realized is that listening to people's stories in the room, some of these people had lost everything through drinking. See, some of these people had lost their families, their wives and kids, but their immediate families, their houses, their jobs. They'd stolen off people, they'd fought people, and what I realized is that I hadn't got to that stage. And what I realized is that I always use this analogy that my train was on the same track. It was headed in the same direction. I just got off a few stops early. And I stopped whilst I still had my wife and kids. I still had my friends around me. I still had my family talking to me. I still had my house. I still had all those things. I hadn't done anything stupid. I hadn't got to the point where I'd stolen off anybody, or I'd pissed anybody off, or I'd had a fight with anybody or anything. I didn't get to that stage, but I don't think for 1 minute that may not have happened. All of that stuff may have happened at some point had I carried on the same path, because it was starting to get destructive. And I just managed to sort of get off the train before it got to those stations. And that's kind of how I always think about it. And I realized that going to those meetings and hearing those stories was starting to be, it kind of it done its job for me.
Yeah.
And I'd had the wake up call that I needed, and I had all the tools I needed to keep myself on track by that point. But some people who are still they live with this physical addiction every single day. And I'm thankfully I never quite had that. So some people need those meetings to stop them going and having a drink. Some people can be sober for 40 years and then suddenly succumb and fall off the wagon again. And thankfully I've never really been in that bracket. So I would always recommend going to AA if you're thinking of stopping, because it can be a lifesaver for some people.
So drugs weren't problematic. It just come with a drink, was it?
Yeah, drugs was something that just came with the territory. When you're in a band and you're in pubs, you get offered it, and you just go, all right then. And it was more that way than, but I would very rarely, if I was going out, I would think ahead and get some. It was not that. It would be I'd make a phone call once I was 2 or 3 pints deep,
Yeah.
And that was so that it was more that way round. But it was never really that wasn't really a big issue for me. It was just a way of getting more fucked, if you pardon my French. But I getting more wasted. I'd be getting drunk get me to a certain point, and then I needed that extra step it was the next step into oblivion. And that's what it represented to me, rather than something in itself. I was never addicted to cocaine or addicted to drink. I don't feel, not in the same way that people would think of it. It was more that it was just an escape. So what I realized is I needed to fix the things that were wrong, that were causing me to want to escape. What was I escaping from?
Yeah.
And I didn't like myself. And the more that's a vicious circle. Then you start to dislike yourself, so you drink more. Then you hate yourself for doing that, and then that's when it spirals downwards. And spiraling downwards can be quite a seductive thing. I was quite enjoying the downward spiral, because you're letting go, you're giving into all of your cravings and doing exactly what you want, and you'd be the most selfish version of yourself, which is quite nice. Quite nice to give in to yourself.
Yeah.
But if you've got things and people around you that rely on your responsibilities, you've got people you love, you don't want to let down. And that's when you realize, when you get a bit of perspective, you realize what's more important. Me doing exactly what I want all the time, or being there for people around you, and there has to be a selfish reason for doing it. For me, it was music.
So what you're basically saying is, alcoholic, a bit like mental health, a stigma. The word alcoholic, because at the end of the day, if someone drinks every now and again, we can still class them as an alcoholic because they drink. But what you're trying to say is, you're saying if it messes the rest of your life up and things around you, and you can't cooperate with things, that's what you class as an alcoholic.
If it starts to get in the way, then it's a negative in your life. Then you get rid of it. It's like if you have like a person in your life that is just toxic and just makes your life miserable, what do? You get rid of that person out of your life because they're not doing you any good. So why do I want to do the same thing with alcohol? If it's being an absolute negative and getting in the way of things you want to do. If you don't have things that you want to do and you can happily have a few drinks, great. I mean, I think the term alcoholic is misleading, and it gives people an excuse, a grey area to live in. You can be, I wouldn't class myself as an alcoholic. I never like to use that word because I don't feel it's accurate. But it's such a broad term, but people think it's if you're drinking first thing in the morning. That's what everyone thinks it is. And it's like, well, that's not really it. And I think it's distracting from what the issue is. And the issue for me was alcohol was getting in the way of what I wanted to do. It was stifling my creativity, stopping me being a good dad, a good husband. And it was just stopping me from being the best version of myself I could be, stopping me singing the best, performing the best, and just being happy in my life. It was starting to really push me down and down and down, and in every aspect. And that's when I'm thinking, well, it was like walking around with a carrying a horse the whole time. Like, you've got this thing on. Why are you doing it? It's ridiculous. So you don't need it. It's heavy. You don't need it. Get rid of it and you can walk. It's like, that's what it felt like. It was that ridiculous. Why would you do something to yourself that is such a negative? I'm not anti-drinking, by the way. I'm anti-drinking for me. I'm anti-me drinking.
Yeah.
But if, you know, I know people who can have a drink, go to the pub, have a few pints, and it's not a negative in their life. They still can perform in their job, in their lives. They're still a great person, and all power to those people. And I wholeheartedly endorse drinking if you can handle it. But I personally can't. So it was a negative for me.
I mean, I've just got a question in there. Did you hit rock bottom before you got better? But what I want to allude
Actually,
to.
no, I did. No, that wasn't. It was in some ways I did. It depends what you term as rock bottom. For me,
I think you've explained it there. And I think all I will say at this part now is, if anybody is struggling with drinking, your advice would be to go on Alcohol Anonymous, or I don't know.
Yeah, but if you talk to people if you know people who have stopped, then that might be a first step. You know, there's no problem. I'll always chat to anybody who finds me on Facebook, and I'll always give you the benefit of my experience, my perspective, and I've been very open on Facebook about my giving up drinking and my issues with it and my battles with mental health. I've always been very open about that because I think it's important that we talk about it. So I thought, well, I've got to walk the walk as well as talk the talk. So I'm always happy to talk to anybody who finds you on Facebook or on Instagram, whatever. Drop me a message.
What's your Facebook and Instagram?
If you get Ronan Macmanus, if you just find me Ronan Macmanus or Ronan Macmanus Music, or R Macmanus Music on Instagram or Twitter, and I'm always happy to talk to anybody. I'd always say I'm not professional. I'm not, you know, but I can give you my perspective and what my experience is. And how and what works for me. That might not work for everybody, but I'm happy to give you the benefit of my experience. And that some people I've spoken to on Facebook, old friends of mine, who aren't ready to go to any sort of professional help and don't even know whether they need it or not. And you might not need professional help. You might just need to take a bit of a break and cut down a bit, get a bit of perspective.
I mean, one of the biggest reasons why I got you on here, we're personal friends. And you've told me things in confidence before, but I know you are a person that wants to help other people. And
yeah,
obviously,
I'm open.
having a dad, the dad you had, having Elvis Costello as your brother, having a wife you've got, the kids you've got, you sat on a settee and told your wife you want to take your life. I mean, yeah, sorry. Before we go on to the viewers or anyone, I want to ask you. Why? Because I always want to know why my brother took his life. I will never find that, but you know.
No, I mean, for me, it was at the time when I left the Bible Codes. It was around that time, and I was in a really bad state, and it was not to do with the lads or the situation with the band. That wasn't really. That was nothing to do with that. I got myself, I don't know what it was, just I was very unhappy with my life and myself and everything, and I was really struggling. I'd given up drink at that point and I was still really low. And I just couldn't see a way out. And all I can describe it like, it was just like everything was just too close to see perspective. And I just said to her, I just couldn't see what was good. And bear in mind, my wife sat there next to me. My kids are in the next room. And I'm sitting there telling her that I don't see what I've got to live for, you know. And it's just that she was like, but looking back, and it's amazing to me looking back that I said those things, that I was thinking that way, because it obviously wasn't true. I had so much to live for. But I just felt like I had to say that to her, or else it may have happened. If you know what I mean? It was dangerously close to the point where I was thinking I didn't see what I had to live for. And I look back and it's crazy now. But I know I've got a good friend of mine who talked about this all the time, and we lost him last year. But did
he take his own life?
I don't think it was quite that cut and dried, but yeah, it was. It was. I think he was not exactly trying to avoid it, but it wasn't. It was a. Yeah, it was a difficult one to assess, really. But because it wasn't the official cause of death, wasn't suicide, But I think there was definitely an element of mental. Well, there was he talked about all the time, and I think that sort of scared me to the point where I thought I have to say something, because as soon as you say it, it's unlikely you're going to do it. I felt like if I just felt it was just scared me, and that would be what I would class as my rock bottom. Some people's rock bottom can go a lot lower than that. That was that was the thing that made me think I've got to change my life, change everything. I just wanted to time out the band, and I just needed to work on get myself, to a situation where I was just worrying about me and my family, and I didn't want to I couldn't have the pressures of the band and everything and music and everything on top of that. I just had to do my own thing for a while and try and get myself to a situation where I was in a better place. And now getting back playing with the lads is fantastic, because it's different. I mean, I'm such a better person for having that time out.
What made you think it, Ronan? Do you know what made you think it? Was you thinking about it for days before?
It was I couldn't think straight, and it was that feeling of not seeing a way out of feeling this bad, and that is the thing I think that led me to think, well, I could just everybody would be better off if I wasn't here.
Yeah.
And you feel like you're letting everybody down. You're feeling like you're just worthless.
Did you plan it? Did you plan anything to do?
I didn't get to that. I didn't get to that stage where how I would do it, because as soon as I felt like I had no way out, that's when I thought, I've got to speak to my missus now. I've got to, and I think those that talk about it don't do it. And the fact that I wanted to talk about it made me feel like maybe I'm not going to do this. This isn't, but it scared me enough to think. It crossed my mind. Everyone's going to be better off without me if I wasn't here, and my kids would be better off without me. I'm just useless. And my wife would be better. I'm useless, and it was all this stuff was just. And then I thought, I could just end it. That'd be a lot easier, wouldn't it?
What did your wife say? What did your wife say to you when you said that to her? She
was just like, what are you talking about? Look at your kids in the next room that are all this stuff. And then it was like, right, we've got to get this sorted. And that's when we kind of, that's when I decided to make some changes in my life. And that's what I needed to do, is to make some changes, take some pressure off, give myself some space to make the changes inside. I had to make the changes outside to help make the changes inside. And, but she was obviously upset. It was like, there I was from her perspective, telling her that her and the kids weren't worth living for, which is, I can see that totally. It's completely out of order thing to say and to think. But when you're in that situation, you don't think about that. You're not thinking, you're thinking that you hate yourself so much that you just think, these people are going to be better off without me. And then everything will go away if I do this. Everything goes away.
It might be too much time. When people say it's selfish, it might be too much time thinking about yourself. That's why.
Well, because it is. So you end up in your own head, and that's what I found, that it drove me down and down into depression, and into the point where I just couldn't see what was around me, and for me it was. It wasn't so much that I was going to kill myself. It was a fact that it seemed like I had this moment where it seemed like a good option. And that's when I checked myself. So I would never say that I was on the brink of it, because it's not quite true. It would, and I like to be honest about it, because it's not fair to be dishonest about it to those that really get to the edge of that. I wasn't quite on the edge of that, but it crossed my mind as I could just do that, couldn't I? And that for me was enough to think that I'd never.
What about people that are sitting there now, Ronan? Listening to you speaking, and they ain't got the wife, they ain't got the family around them. What would you say to them people?
Well, there's you're not on your own, which is the one thing that you feel so alone in that situation. And you're not on your own. There's plenty of people that are going through the same things as you. And there will always be people around you that it's not just the person that loses things. Everyone else around them loses the knock-on effect. All those people around you, the parents, the brothers, sisters, the friends, and it has a knock-on effect to so many people, and people don't realize how much they're loved by people. And it's always just try talking to somebody about it, somebody you trust, and that can just lift the clouds and make you feel a bit like there's some hope, because there's always something to live for. You know, life itself is a short period of time in the grand scheme of the world, and you know, some people don't get to live. Some people don't have the luck of things that we have, and there's always things to be thankful for. And it's really hard to see that when you're in that situation, but just try talking to somebody about it is all I'd say, because someone else's perspective on your problems can really help, and it can save you.
I mean, our class mental health exactly the same as cancer. I believe we've all got it inside us, and it only takes something to push it out. And the thing is, people are very, very open now about cancer, and I think people should be a lot more open about mental health. We can say people are more open about mental health now. It gets mentioned now and again on the TV, but what really gets done about it? There's not much that really gets done about it, you know.
But I think a lot of it is done. I think a lot is done as a person-to-person level. I think it's not. You don't see it in the media as much. There are campaigns and there are things that come out on there, but whether good work is done is friend to friend. You know, people, person to person on a level like we're talking now. We have done on the phone for the last few years. You've often had conversations about this very subject, and it's those conversations where the difference has come.
Yeah,
I don't think years ago I'd have chatted to a mate about it. I don't think I would have done. But the fact is now that it's become acceptable to do so, people are doing so, and I think that will take a longer time to show up in terms of the wider society. But it is generally more acceptable to talk to people about things, and that's where the difference has come. It's not so much in the media, not so much on the TV. That's not where it's important. It's important on the ground level.
Yeah, I mean, I would say this. You know, when people say go and do exercise, it does endorphins. I disagree, because there's people there that are struggling that can't do nothing. So without even walking, it's all about talking. And I believe if you can talk to people, what is it? Something shared it can be a problem solved.
Problem halved, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, problem half can be a problem solved. But what I will say is this, Ronan. So let me ask you, what you've done. Obviously, after that day, you sat on the settee and said what you said. Did you go and have medication? What did you do?
I did. I had some antidepressants. Some people are against them. I think they worked for me. They keep me. I'm still on them now. They keep me on track. But mainly what it was just I just lightened my load a little bit in terms of what I was doing and what I was trying to do, and I took some of the pressure off myself. Took myself out of the pressure situations, and I just decided to try to give myself the space to have a bit of perspective on my life and people around me, and that's what I did. That's what helped me. And the fact that I just basically I made it so that I just focused more on my family and my home life, and I had a band going at the time, which I ended up leaving. And that was, I needed a bit of space, and I needed just to have a more family life. And that's what I did. I still did some gigs, solo gigs, and just kept things easy, made things as easy as possible for myself. I still needed to work and I still needed to earn money. So I went out there and got some solo gigs and went around, and I was lucky enough to be able to do that. And so I just took care of myself for a little while, and I needed to do that. I needed to take care of my wife and kids and just spend that time. And that was all it was like. I just stopped some of the plates spinning that was spinning. I had too many going at the same time, too much pressure. And that helped me. And then I just slowly can build up your life again to the point where you can carry that load again, you know.
So basically you never get over it. It's more, I mean, it's mad to say how I think I'm going to say it, but I mean, I lost a sister to cancer, lost a brother to suicide, but it's a little bit like chemotherapy, and the chemotherapy sometimes works for some people, and sometimes it don't work for others. You know, that's why others take their life, and the chemotherapy helps other people, and they're still here today. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really what's going to work for you, really, and if you give yourself the space, that's what I just think. Give yourself the space to be able to get a bit of perspective on your life and what's important to you, and just take care of the people that are around you. And what I found when I stopped drinking is that a lot of people who I was prioritizing over my family sometimes just stopped calling me because we didn't have very much in common apart from we got drunk together.
Yeah.
And that was a bit of a wake up call for me. And I realized what was important and what wasn't. And sometimes you can put importance on things and it's just not helping you.
Yeah.
So I just kind of, I just gave myself some space. That's what it was. And I was chatting to my close friends around me. That I've got a friend of mine who's had mental health issues over the years, and me and him spoke at length about a lot of things. And I just lightened the load by talking to people around me that I knew were receptive to it. And you know who in your friends are receptive to this stuff, and you just naturally you come to terms with it. You start to think, well, you see a way forward and start to feel better about things. But yeah, I'd certainly found that not drinking, give myself a clear head, that definitely helped me.
Yeah. But I'll tell you what, Ronan, it was an absolute pleasure. Again, before we leave, if you could tell everyone how they can get in touch with you, and I know you're a big advocate on helping other people as well. And anybody wants your music, wants a bit of your music, wants to listen to a bit of your music, because
so we've got music. Yeah, music wise, I mean, I've the Bible Code Sundays was the Irish rock band I had going for years. That's been going over 25 years. The band from its inception to now. We've got plenty of albums out there to check out. So that's Bible Code Sundays. We're not a Christian rock band. We're good lapsed Catholics. So that's all the Irish stuff. So we sing a lot about Irish culture and Irish music and Irishness around the world. And so that's really great. Me and my brother Rory did an album called Elephant in the Room, and that was about our personal relationship with each other and our Liam Noel Gallagher style arguments. But so he wrote a happy album to deal with that. But that was all that's now under my name. So we go to Ronan Macmanus, MacManus rather than MC. Then you can check out my music there. There's a couple of solo albums there. And then Brand New Zeros is my latest project now. So we've just literally released an album in July. So that was delayed from last year. So there's some things on there some songs in there which are inspired by my issues of mental health and alcohol and things like that. So there's a few tracks on there which are kind of that's more like a rock, bluesy rock sort of band. So all those things, that's all that music to check out. Also, the girl I'm managing, Breeze Red Wine, is a pop musician. So if you like, she's just turned 19. She's very young and she's got great future ahead of her. You can check her out. So Breeze Red Wine. Breeze like the wind and red wine as in what you drink. So you can check her out. And I'm on Facebook as Ronan Macmanus, my personal profile, Ronan Macmanus Music. Also Brand New Zeros as a page on Facebook. Instagram, R Macmanus Music or Brand New Zeros. Twitter, R Macmanus Music. Or Brand New Zeros. We're across all those platforms. So contact me. We do some things, sometimes do live streams and things like that. So I need to get back into that a bit more because it's sort of let it slip. We've been busy recently, so I need to get back out there and do it. And or I can be found on the Peter McDonough Voice in the Corner mental health channel. So
I mean, just got a question there. Just funny how things work together. I just got a question there. So you do lives. The viewers have said, would you be around Monday night to do a live? Like, just basically, they'll ask questions and you'll answer them.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be around Monday night. Yeah.
Monday night. So if we do Monday night, what time's good for you? Because I know the kids go to bed and things like that. What time's good for you?
No, I can make myself available whatever time in the evening. It's fine. I don't think I'm doing anything. What's happening Monday? God, I don't know.
Monday.
Oh, yeah, I think it should be fine. What time in the evening would
We'll
you
go for
be looking at?
7 p.m. Monday.
Sounds good.
Basically, let people ask their questions.
Yeah.
We'll put this podcast out a few days before, so it gives them time to watch it, listen to it. It will go on the other channel as well, Voice from the Corner. But it was a pleasure, Ronan, and I'll catch up with you on Monday. And I hope the family are all well and safe. And it was absolute pleasure you spreading your story, because to me, this is massive in my heart, that people helping with, you know, I've lost people down to this. You obviously have lost friends down to it. We've all everybody.
It's a fantastic thing you're doing here, Peter, and it's such an important thing to give people a chance to hear other people's stories, and because it'll resonate with people and it'll help people. It will save lives eventually, and it's fantastic. So you keep doing what you're doing, mate, and it's very much appreciated, and I'm so grateful to be asked on. And that is the top and bottom of it, mate.
Nice one. And I'll tell you what, I want your
sealing your lines now.
he's a big boxing man, and I want your predictions this week for the boxing as well. You got Josh Ronan back this weekend. I'll ring you. We'll sort something out. But,
fantastic.
Before you go, last question, because I know you're going to get asked it when you come live on Monday. So last question: who's the best artist, you or Elvis Costello?
Hands down, it's me.
Right, mate. Look after yourself.
Cheers, Peter.
Cheers, mate. Last one.